My name is Richard Roberts. I'm a 1993 Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine. I'm a molecular biologist and I do research. So I work on methylation in bacteria, DNA methylation in bacteria, with a view to try and understand what it does and why it's important. And it turns out it's important for a variety of reasons that we would never have guessed when it was first discovered. Adenovirus, yes.
Adenoviruses.
Many years ago. So this was why I won the Nobel Prize, for discovering that genes in higher organisms, eukaryotes, were arranged a little differently than those in bacteria. And what we discovered was that a typical gene in a higher organism is split up into pieces that when you make the RNA copy of that gene, it gets cut and spliced into a smaller piece that then looks like a typical piece of RNA that would have been produced in a bacterium. It's exactly the same way that film editors make a lot of footage, cut and splice and edit so that when you see the final product it looks as though it's continuous, even though it was not filmed continuously. In higher organisms, this is how higher organisms make the RNA that is then going to be translated into protein. They make a very long piece of RNA, cut it and splice it into a piece that makes sense, feed it to the ribosome, and then it makes the protein that you need. Well, I think the important thing is, if you didn't know about this, even though we have the complete sequence of the human genome, we know every base that is in the human genome, you would not be able to interpret it in terms of the proteins that are being made by the human genome. And this is true for everything that is higher, every higher organism, this is true. And I think one of the interesting things is we know that this process that cuts and splices the RNA makes mistakes occasionally, and occasionally it makes mistakes because of a mutation that is present in the human genome, and now it's possible to correct it. And one of my very best postdoctoral fellows, Adrian Craner, showed that it is possible to correct this in the case of spinal muscular atrophy, so that kids who used to die when they were 4, 5, 6 years old can now live because of this cure that he came up with. Well, DNA is the genetic material. It's the basic code of life, if you like, that is present in every organism, except for some viruses which use RNA instead of DNA. But for you and I and bacteria, we use DNA. This has the code of life for us, and then that is basically translated by it's copied into RNA and then goes to the ribosome and makes protein. And this is why we are alive, because of the proteins that are made on the basis of the DNA that we have in every cell in our body. Protein is a string of amino acids. There are 20 amino acids, and these are hooked together to make the proteins that do many things in our bodies. The enzymes, for instance, that we use in order to make life possible. Proteins that are structural, that form the basis, myosin and so on, things that form the basis of all the cells. But almost all of our cells depend on these proteins in order to be able to be active, in order to be able to work. Well, basically, in my case, what I do something that we call bioinformatics. Basically, we look at DNA sequence we try to work out what are the proteins or RNAs or anything that is coded by this DNA, and then to understand what those proteins that are coded by the DNA, what they do in cells. In my case, at the moment, what I'm working on are something called DNA methylases. These are enzymes that modify DNA. They put a methyl group onto DNA, and that affects what happens when the DNA is translated and what happens when the cell expresses these DNA methylases. Well, I was lucky. So when I won the Nobel Prize, I was working for a company. And had I been at an academic institution, then they would have dragged me out to help them raise money for that institution. But because I was working at a company and we didn't need money because we had products and we sold them, it didn't actually matter to the company that I had won. They were happy about it, of course, but it didn't really affect their business in any way. Whereas had I been at university, it would have made a big difference. But one thing that happens after you win a Nobel Prize is you get invited to go and talk to people and do interviews like this one and so on. So you gain a certain celebrity as a result of that, not a Hollywood celebrity, but a scientific celebrity, if you like. And for me, I like that. So I like to go and visit places, campuses, universities, talk to students, because one of the things that I really like is students often ask questions. And some of the questions you may think are stupid, but in fact, very often you hear a question and you think, oh, I know the answer to that. And then you think about it, you realize you don't know the answer. And so that makes you think. And really, if you're in science, you want to be thinking all the time. You want to be thinking about new things. You want to be asking new questions. Curiosity is what science is really all about. Well, I like the idea of awards and sort of telling people who've done well that they've done well and making their names known to society. But I also have this feeling that for people who do not get the award, but know that they're nominated, this can be rather disappointing. And I can tell you from my own experience, I did the work that led to the Nobel Prize in 1977. The person who independently made the same discovery was very widely recognized. He got awards right, left, and center. I didn't. The first award I ever got was the Nobel Prize. I had no awards, no prizes before that. And after I'd learned that I'd been nominated for the Nobel Prize, I always thought the reason I'd not won anything previously was because I'd not been nominated. But that first year, I was all ready. I had my speeches ready, I was ready to go, but I didn't win that year. That is terribly disappointing. And so for me, it became personal. I felt a little off. These prizes, while they're very good for the people who win, not so good for the people who know they're nominated and don't win. Well, I would make everything anonymous. I really think one should never be told that you've been nominated for a prize. Because if you know you've been nominated and you think you should win, then if you don't win, it's disappointing. Disappointment is not a good thing. So, you know, if you're a scientist, you've done some nice work, I know of the work that you've done, I can present it as well as you can, probably. You don't need to be told.
As far as you know?
Well, so I don't know a great deal about what's going on in Spain, but I do know worldwide there are a lot of problems for scientists at the moment with politicians really taking advantage of scientists to discredit them in ways that they can. And probably one of the worst ways has been the COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of people claim that COVID was a lab leak, that it leaked out of a lab. There's zero evidence for that. And yet the conspiracy theories about that abound. And because of that, a lot of scientists are being, used as objects for politicians to say, well, scientists are not good. There are a lot of attacks on science at the moment around the world, but especially in the US, and usually from right-wing politicians who somehow have found that going after science and scientists is somehow good for them politically. And I think this is terrible. I think this is absolutely awful. Science is not a political object in any way. Science, we're looking for facts, we're looking for the truth, we're trying to make observations, we're trying to improve the lives of everybody that we deal with. In fact, if you look at the living conditions that we're in at the moment, almost everything that is good about science, about society, came from science, right? You have cell phones, they were pretty good. They came from science. They didn't come from anything else, they came from science. COVID vaccines, they came very quickly because science was good. Testing for COVID, that came very quickly because science was good. And if you look around at healthcare, healthcare is so improved at the present time over what it was even 50 years ago because of science. Science has been wonderful for this world. We've increased the economy, we've increased everything. Why would you attack these people? What is the point of this? And doing it for political gain, I find to be appalling, absolutely appalling. We should be looking up to scientists. We should be trying to help them, trying to make sure they make more discoveries that can help society and can benefit society, both economically, but just in terms of the quality of life within science, within society.
Yeah.
Science is good. I would mention one other thing. If you're a scientist and you go to another country and you meet another scientist, you have a friend. Okay? Science is a very active community where we get on well with one another. We can disagree about things, but we just don't find it necessary to shoot one another to show that we were right and the other person was wrong. I think science really brings to society a wonderful way of doing business. And I rather abhor the politicians who feel that it's okay to attack science to try to make political gains. This is not a good thing. Oh, it's a real problem. I think social media combined with artificial intelligence, means that as soon as you say you like something, you see more of it. You never see the other side. And this means it becomes very difficult to make rational judgments about what is true and what is not true. So I don't indulge in social media. I won't have anything to do with it. I just don't think it's a good thing. It could be used for good, but so often it's used for bad. This spreading of conspiracy theories is really not good. It doesn't do anybody any good. Young children are probably the most open source that you can hope for in terms of giving them good information and allowing them to make good decisions. And I fear that by allowing them to get involved in social media too early is terrible. We have to do a much better job of educating our children. In general, children are very smart people. You talk to them, they listen, they reason, they can do very well. And if we can avoid trying to inculcate them into social media and having them just pushed in one direction or the other, that would be very good. I can give you an example. I'm a very big advocate for GMOs, genetically modified organisms, which Europe is against for reasons that in my view are totally immoral. But I gave a talk recently to some children about age 12, 13, about GMOs. And I gave a class, and they'd all been told they had to write to me afterwards and tell me what they thought about the talk. And I got some interesting comments. One comment was, this was the first time they felt they'd been spoken to as though they were adults. I thought this said something pretty bad about the teachers. If the teachers are not talking to the kids as though they're adults and can think like adults, that's a bit of a problem. But the best comment I got was from a young girl who said she'd gone back and talked to her parents who were anti-GMO. She told them all the arguments that I'd been making, and she was able to convince her parents that their anti-GMO views were wrong, and now they were pro-GMO, right? Children, these are such a resource for the future. We have to do a better job of educating them, okay? They are smart. Kids are smart. By the time they're 10, 11, 12, they're really smart, they're curious, they're open, but they can reason. And provided that they're taught facts, that they hear good stuff, they will make the right decisions. We have to avoid getting them hooked on social media at that age. We really do. I don't have a very high opinion of social media. I think Zuckerberg and co have done a tremendous disservice to society. Terrible. I think the one thing that I'm really very concerned about at the moment is this whole GMO issue. So I've been running a campaign among Nobel laureates to provide support for genetically modified organisms. Because if we're ever going to improve the food supply in the developing countries, we need modern breeding techniques for the plants, that is GMOs. And Europe has come out against GMOs. And I think they've done it for all the wrong reasons, because Greenpeace, they found it to be a very good money-raising campaign for them. There's no evidence that GMOs are dangerous. In fact, after 30-odd years, we have not a single problem, not a single example where GMO has been dangerous. People are growing these, eating them all the time. All the animals in Europe are fed by GMOs. Apparently this is perfectly okay, but you shouldn't eat them because they're too dangerous for you. And what's happened is that the anti-GMO campaign has gone around the world really telling everybody, almost being missionaries, telling everybody how dangerous they are. And in many cases, countries have come out against GMOs. They won't let the farmers improve their crops using these modern techniques. You know, there are 800 million people go to bed hungry every night in this world. Most of them are not in Europe, they're not in the US, they're not in the developed countries, they're in the developing countries. They need food. And GMOs, by improving the crops that they grow, we can help them get those foods. We can help them get better nutrients, more nutrients in their foods. You know, golden rice, one of the classic examples, golden rice puts beta-carotene into the grain of rice, makes it slightly yellow, but that is the precursor of vitamin A. That can prevent blindness in children. Okay? Children die, thousands die every year because they go blind and cannot survive in their society because of vitamin A deficiency. Finally, after a long, long time, almost 25 years, the Philippines decided, yes, they were going to accept golden rice. And now Greenpeace and the anti-GMO advocates have gone to the courts in the Philippines and have blocked golden rice and any GMO products from being grown in the Philippines. For me, this is a crime against humanity. These people who are trying to stop good crops, good nutrients from being delivered into the hands of the developing countries. This is immoral. I don't know, how do these people sleep at night knowing, and they should know by now, they've been told many times, they are literally killing people around the world. Millions have died because of the delays in golden rice or because of Greenpeace and the anti-GMO activists. And you may guess I feel quite strongly about this. But Europe needs to change. Europe needs to change its attitude towards genetically modified crops. These are good. And not only can they help with food, they can help attack climate change too. We can grow crops and make crops that will suck CO2 out of the atmosphere. Okay? We're putting CO2 into the atmosphere at a rate that is unconscionable. We have to stop it if we're going to stop climate change. Because not only is that going to kill people in the developing world, it will kill people here in Europe too. You know, already the champagne growers have trouble growing champagne grapes in Champagne. They've started growing them in the south of England. Why? Because of climate change. With GMO grapes, we could fix that. I think my message to students is always find whatever it is that you're really passionate about and make a career of it. If you do that, you will be happy. If you take a career just for money or just for some other reasons, you're not going to be so happy. But if you love what you do, if you go to work on a Monday and you say, great, I've got to go to work today, and on Friday you say, what am I going to do over the weekend? Until Monday comes around so I can go to work again, then you'll be happy.